About 8 seconds.
Oh dear.
5, 4, 3, 2.
All right. Good. So, you introduce me, or should I introduce myself?
Introduce yourself.
All right. Sweet, amazing. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming here tonight. My name is Jakob Ahlberg. I am a master student, or rather, I have a master exam in nature conservation and ecology. Graduated this August from the University of Uppsala. I am, as of now, employed at the County Administrative Board in Dalarna, specifically the game unit. And, oh dear, I seem to have a cold there. No worries. And yeah, I was going to present my master's thesis for you tonight. You're going to get the sort of the popular science version. But this is the thesis which I graduated with. And the title I chose for it was "With Neighbours Like These, Who Needs Enemies?" And it is about Scandinavian wolves and the different things that influences the size of their territories. And in fact, I'm going to start off with a statement. This was actually some feedback. I've done this presentation once before, and I got some feedback. So shout out to Emil Svensson, or Emil at Svenska Rovdjursföreningen, who told me this. He told me, next time, start with your conclusions, and then you can work your way back to them. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, I'm going to tell you why the 3 things which are the key factors which influence Scandinavian wolf territory sizes are the total population size, so the total population size of the Scandinavian wolf population, the number of wolves in the pack, and the latitude which the pack is found at. So we start there. But to sort of get you all into this sort of the right mood, I thought I'd start you with a primer, an introduction to some of the core concepts which I sort of worked with during this thesis, which were home ranges and territories, and the difference between those two. Now, a home range, and now I think I'm talking for mostly biology students here right now, so I think this is going to be maybe a bit of repetition, but we take it from the top. Home ranges are pretty much the area which an animal traverses during their life. Usually, an animal has more than one home range through their life, and home ranges can constantly shift depending on the needs of the animal. For instance, if an animal in winter needs to look for a particular kind of food, the home range will change during winter to reflect its need for this specific resource. And then if it has another area where the animal goes to breed and have young, then the home range will change temporally, and in the different areas, so it reflects where they prefer to have their young, and so on and so forth. Now, for example, the reindeer, the caribou, in particular the population I use as an example lives in Quebec. That population there of more forest but still alpine caribou had 2 things which primarily influenced the shape and size of their home ranges, and that was open meadows, open alpine meadows, and old growth forest. So the open alpine meadows had their favorite type of forage, ground lichen, and different sort of herbs. But if snow cover prevented them from reaching, so there we have it, climate, and it's also temporal because it's most likely going to be in winter, they would always have as part of their home ranges, and they would shift their home ranges to the forest where they could find tree lichen. which they then used as a second type of forage. So that is the home range. Then there's the territory. Now, those two can sometimes be used like interchangeably, but they are quite different. A territory is a part of a home range where an animal displays a territorial behavior. Now, territorial behaviors are defensive and can also be quite aggressive behaviors which they show towards others of its own kind. So, and it's in defense of a particular type of resource. These can be mates, it can be food resources, it can be very desirable nests. And some animals display territorial behaviors in only a very small patch, a very small part of their home range, and only do a very short time. These are usually those species which have leks and particular rutting periods. That is a type of territoriality which is very tied to breeding. But then you have animals that are more generalized territorial. They will show pretty much all of their home range is their territory, and they will fight anyone who shows up in the territory who is of their own kind. And to use an example of a very interesting case, it's the African lion. So African lions are very interesting because the males and the females have overlapping territories. So males will usually coalitions will have territories which overlap with female prides, and can be one pride or can be several, and they will fight other males over females, over breeding rights. Females, on the other hand, they will be territorial towards other female prides, but that is over resources, food resources. So they're territorial because they're defending a resource, because of course that matters for them, so they can rear their young. They need sufficient food, they need good hunting grounds. So that is one example. Territoriality, it can both be indirect, vocalizations, scent marking, just patrolling presence, or it can be direct confrontations, displays and fighting. Now, both of these are very important when we discuss the species of my focus species, which is the Scandinavian grey wolf, Canis lupus. So to move in there, so I worked with Scandinavian grey wolves. I worked with the GPS data, so spanning over 20 years from 1998 to 2021. So quite a large data set. And of course, to do a little primer on the wolves as well, wolves are of course social territorial animals. They are territorial year-round, and they are territorial primarily to defend food resources, and of course dens, like their young. There has been cases of wolves fighting over mates, but it's not common. We'll actually get to that later. But how did I work my thesis? This is going to be like the boring technical part, but I think it's going to be still interesting. So what I did was that I took this humongous data set, I used it to pretty much create these yearly estimations of these different wolf territories, depending on the different packs and such. And then I took all these different parameters, all these different factors, the number of neighboring wolf packs, the pack size, the total population size of that year, the latitude, sort of a central latitude point in the territory, the road density, and the building density within the territory. And then I ran them through R. And it was a lot of work of fiddling around with different parameters. But what I then concluded with was that, as I said in the beginning, 3 of these, those that just lit up, we can go back and forth a little bit. There we go. Those 3 were the most important factors. And here is just so you can see how the results from all my analysis work looked like. So what I pretty much did here was that I created these different models where I used different parameters. And at first I had a huge model where all the parameters were, all these factors were in it, and I ran it. And then I ran models where I reduced and changed which parameters I had in them. And though all these models had different AIC values, and pretty much what you try to do when you run these type of analysis is that you try to get as low as possible. And well, as we can see here, running all these were some of the last models I ran. So here we have pack size, latitude, we have pack size, population size, latitude, and forest road density, because I split the roads, forest road and main roads. And finally, the one I ended up with, we can see here that it's not by much, but it's still significant that the one with the best AIC score of 2,250.6 was the model I ended up with. And to go in a little bit more detail, because that's of course interesting, like of these parameters, of these factors, which ones were the most important? So, kind of interesting. I found that latitude was important, pack size was important, statistically significant. That's what the p-value I look at here. So what you look for in a p-value is, of course, you want it to be 0.05 or lower. So both of these qualified. But the kind of fun thing was that the total population technically isn't statistically significant. But it's still significant enough that when I remove it from the final model, the AIC value becomes worse. So yeah, that's a problem with analysis. It's significant, but it's technically not significant. Yeah, just a little bit insight in science work. It's confusing, but there we have it, black and white. Here we have our three important factors. Now, what does it actually mean? Great, we have the analysis. Now we actually need to sort of discuss and analyze our results. Now, we start with total population size. Now, what I found was that the total population size, so the total Scandinavian wolf population size, when it was larger, territories tended to shrink. So that would indicate that they are competing. And we know this to be true because in the case where areas where there are little human interference, the main leading cause of death for a wild wolf is other wolves. They kill each other in border skirmishes, can fight quite viciously with one another over territory and over different areas. But in areas with high human interference, the leading cause of death is hunting, car accidents, it's humans. We're the main cause of death. And now the important part about this is then that we must think about differences in regions. So a very classic example when it comes to wolves, you probably all have heard of it, is of course Yellowstone National Park. Those wolves are probably some of the most well-studied wild wolves in the entire world. And they are used time and again as an example. But then we have our population in Scandinavia, also very well studied, but with very, very different circumstances, very different conditions. So in one area, we have low human interference. I mean, apart from tourists, these wolves are very much free to sort of live their lives. And then we have central Scandinavia, highly managed forest, highly managed ungulate population, so the primary prey of the Scandinavian wolf, which is of course moose, so which is very heavily regulated by human hunting. You have a lot of forest road. You have a lot of more human presence, even though these areas can be very. Sorry, Andrew, was there something it looked like? No, okay, cool. Even though we can look at a Scandinavian forest and think, oh, it's untouched. I mean, there's so few people here, but it's still a significant difference. So in the case of Scandinavia, I'm going to see if this was still relevant. No, I was jumping back. There we go. So in the case of Scandinavia, the wolf population has increased in size, territories have become smaller, and that is also because they're more packed in, because we can see here, we have here from A to D, so moving in this sort of direction. I have used here mapped. These are from the official wolf reports, yearly wolf reports. We have sort of the same general area where wolves have been found for the past, well, 2 decades or more. Actually more. It's more like 3-4 decades. That hasn't actually changed all that much. It hasn't actually expanded that much in size, but we have more wolves there. So they are rubbing up against each other, and they are competing, but it's not directly. Because remember what I said, that territoriality can both be direct and indirect. And that's the case we have here. We have actually only, when I went through all these reports, scientific reports, from 1998 until 2021, I found only 5 reports of deaths, of mortality, of wolf deaths that could be other wolves. And out of those, only 2 could actually be fairly confidently said have been caused by other wolves. That is not a lot of dead wolves. And that only shows us that even if we can't account for everyone, if they were fighting each other more directly, we should see it. We should actually find more dead wolves that are clearly killed by other wolves, but we don't. So that's that part. So wolves compete in Scandinavia, but indirectly. Then we come to the next factor, which is, this one I think is really fun, because it maybe doesn't really make sense if you think at it, if you try to look at it first. And that is, what I found was that a big pack has a small territory. And it's completely reverse. Small pack, big territory. Now, why is that? Well, from what I could tell, from what I've seen other researchers have found out, and what other people have discussed, it probably has to do that a small pack has to have a larger area to find suitable prey. They are also less competitive. 2 wolves can only do so much against a pack of 5. So a larger pack can claim better hunting grounds, they can defend them against other wolves better, and they can also utilize them more effectively. They utilize the resources in the area more effectively. Now, of course, as someone has pointed out more than one time, wolf packs change quite a lot in size depending on the year and throughout the year. A pack will probably be at its largest during the winter before breeding season, because that's just before the pups will start dispersing, and then it will shrink. So, of course, this means that packs will change in size over time. But we had a sort of general idea. I think actually for this study we used the winter count. So we counted the winter pack. And that can still change from year to year. So winter pack size matters for the yearly average size of the territory. So that's the long and the short of it of that one. That was much quicker. Still interesting, much quicker. And then finally, the final factor which played a huge role, and that was latitude, of course. Now latitude, I'm sorry to say, it's basically just a huge just basket of different smaller factors that are on their own not statistically significant, but when you combine them all together and they all kind of link to latitude, they become significant. Because with latitude you get lower prey density. That's just natural. The further north you go, the lower the sort of biomass of the ecosystem becomes. So you need to roam over a larger area to find sufficient amount of prey. Higher latitudes, you get fewer people. That plays a part. You get fewer roads, you get fewer buildings. a lot of things happen, and of course you also get climate conditions can become harsher in general. So there are a lot of factors that play in here, and in the end, it's a very well-known fact that latitude often affects territory size. So not surprising, but yeah, also slightly boring maybe, because it's such a just a huge pile of different smaller factors. But that is latitude. Further north you go, the larger the territory size becomes. And that is actually it for the thing I plan to say. But now I will take questions. So please, I think we have a lot of time. I think I've been very efficient. Let's see. Yeah, I've been very efficient. So please come with your questions, and let's make it. Let's make it a bit longer. So please, don't be afraid.
For the sake of streaming, let me know and I'll come to you with a microphone for your question.
Oh, Maria?
I just wait for
Wait for the mic.
yeah. Can you hold it? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I wonder about, because you said that it's not very common that wolves kill each other.
Yes. Yeah, here in Scandinavia.
In Scandinavia, yes. Yeah. But still there is sometimes it happens that wolves kill a dog.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that because, why is that? Is it because the behavior of the wolves, is it like they respect their neighbors in a way, or how could you explain it?
Definitely there are elements of territoriality, in at least in the case of larger dogs. It's definitely more likely a territorial challenge. They see it as a dog coming into their territory is, I mean, it's a smaller wolf that has stepped in.
Yeah.
Now, really small dogs, I think, are generally reported as they actually seem to kill them more as, for instance, they would kill a fox or a badger. It's more like, oh, this is a small annoying predator and I might eat it. I think it's generally that they actually eat smaller dogs, because so that's more of a predatory or like a intra-guild killing, so they kill another predator. But with dogs, I think they see more directly as, oh, a larger hunting dog, for instance. That is a very typical attack. They see more of a, yeah, it's a small wolf that has come into my territory, and of course, naturally wolves would, due to all their sort of indirect territorial defense behaviors, scent marking, patrolling, howling, they would generally only enter into another wolf pack's territory if they want to make a challenge.
Yeah.
But dogs, of course, they can't really decide that. They are let loose there because they're there to hunt, or because their owner has decided that we're going to take a walk there or something like that. So yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Oh, we have another question.
I know it was not the focus of your thesis, but
yes.
You read so many reports across like decades.
Yes.
Did you come across any implications of climate change, changing of winter, while reading them?
I don't actually think so. We have to remember that wolves are highly adaptive animals. They are naturally, apart from humans, they're the most widespread mammal on the earth, and they can live from anything from scorching deserts to frozen tundra. So I think wolves are most likely those animals that can always adapt more readily to climate change, simply because they are so adaptable. They could probably, however, be influenced by how climate change affects their prey. So, for instance, if you have a wolf pack that relies more heavily on moose, and moose, we of course know, can be affected by climate change because they're animals that usually prefer colder winters, and if the moose population then suffers or changes its behavioral pattern, we could probably see something in wolves, but it would be an indirect effect. Yes?
Yes.
So my question would be,
Yes.
how are wolves, or do you know if wolves are represented in the Swedish media, and how are they being talked about? Like, are people kind of negatively minded towards them, or is the consensus more positive, or is there a lot of conflict with, for example, farmers or people living in the area?
Fun question. Yes, the wolf debate the wolf is a very debated animal in the Scandinavian media, in this sort of common area. Very loud voices on both sides. Primarily the maybe more against side is certain hunters and certain livestock owners. So it can vary a lot. I think it's also vary a lot in the place, but perhaps the wolf can be. I mean, I do recall one particular instance where a wolf was caught, filmed in Uppsala County. Was it in Tierp? The one who caught the roe deer. So it was basically it was a lone wolf, right? It was a wanderer. That was we have someone who works here at the county administrative board, so that's why I'm using that. And that which was caught on camera during the winter, having caught a roe deer and eating it. All very natural behavior, but it had done it in someone's backyard. And this is necessarily not completely out of the ordinary. It was a young wolf, right? Yeah, it was a young wolf. And roe deers naturally gravitate towards human settlements during winter because they usually have an easy time finding food here. So the wolf went where the roe deer went. But I do believe that was a bit. It was a certain tone in the media that maybe have been a little bit more alarmist, like, oh no, wolf tearing apart a live animal in the backyard. But I think definitely there are both those for and against, but there are a lot of loud voices on both sides. I hope that was a good answer. Yeah. Might I ask, were you? Do you have wolves?
No, it's just because we're from a course environmental communication.
Of course.
We had an example in one of our readings about how wolves are being talked about, and how people can't seem to communicate about them with each other, and
yes.
Also I'm from Germany, so where my family lives, there have been wolves seen so close to the towns and area.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting how all people are talking about the same thing, but not really with each other or with the.
They're talking over each other's heads, sort of. Yeah. Yeah. No. Of course, carnivores are. I mean, they're wonderfully interesting creatures, and they tend to evoke a lot of emotions in us. Not entirely rational ones, so it's not uncommon. But I think Sweden, it has been noted for being one of the most, where it's the most controversial animal. That it definitely is. I could definitely say if you went on to media and started making a media sweep, you would definitely see some very strong opinions being voiced there, and maybe not always entirely based on facts and actual scientific data. Yes. No, sorry. We have another one.
Not really a question, just a comment.
Yeah, of course, because you, Maria, you have quite a lot of experience with this, so.
Yeah, just this media part that I think also that's how media works. I mean, it's not really, it doesn't make any headlines if you write like, it's actually like this, that people feel kind of all right with that there are some wolves around in this village. I mean, it's nothing. Either they must love them or they must hate them. Or, I mean, it's always this black and white kind of thing.
Yeah,
and just like you said, not only like the people who has a real interest in that it would affect them if there are wolves. I mean, you could imagine a hunter like, I don't want to let my dog out in the forest or something.
Yes.
You could also imagine if you have a lot of sheep and you don't want to care about fencing, or you feel very anxious about your sheep. I mean, I respect that. But still, it's also those people who have this old people's idea, maybe from a little bit from fairy tales, a lot from media, I think. And they sort of start feeling that, oh, I can't let my kids out to go alone to school if there is a wolf has been seen some kilometers away from here and things like this. And that's something that sometimes media is sort of, giving fuel to that fire in a way, with the way they report, with the people who are voiced in the media, because it's more interesting, I guess, to talk about fear than acceptance.
That can definitely color the debate. Is there any more questions? Anything more in particular about the study? Or I think we're going to get a speaker after me who knows quite a lot about carnivores here in Uppland, so I'm sure you can grill him even more than you can grill me about the finer points in this particular region. No problem. Don't worry. I'm going to see if there's any more questions, then we can switch over. Any?
All right.
I think we're done then.
Okay.
I'll say thank you all who came here to listen to this. Also thank you to all who are listening online. I think a lot of my family is actually listening online, so I'm going to say hello. I'm online, I'm on YouTube. All right, now I'm done. Thank you all so much for coming here.
So that's the question, shall we keep the schedule or not? Because we are...
We're going to take a 15-minute break, then go.
Okay.
Sebastian talk early, compared to the schedule, but closer to time enough.
Yeah, and if somebody misses something, then they can actually
Watch it later online.
watch it next week.
So I'm going to do that on the...
It's fair enough. And of course, people who were watching at home, they...
Great, thank you. So for those of you who are at home, we're going to accelerate the schedule slightly. We'll have Sebastian's talk in 15 minutes. We're going to take a 15-minute break. So at 10 to 7, so 10 minutes earlier than advertised time, we'll be going with Sebastian's talk. So join us back here then.